All right, our top story at this moment. Opinion pollsters have once again been proven quite wrong in the US elections. Joe Biden's predicted massive lead is evaporating after Trump voters have emerged in large numbers. Trump and Biden are currently locked in tight races in battleground states. Pre-election polls, remember, had Biden leading Trump by an average of 10 points. Republicans blame prejudice against President Trump as the reason for wrong predictions.
The citizens of this country have come out in record numbers. This is a record. There's never been anything like it. To support our incredible movement, we won states that we weren't expected to win. Florida, we didn't win it. We won it by a lot. We won the great state of Ohio. We won Texas. We won Texas by 700,000 votes, and they don't even include it in the tabulations. It's also clear that we have won Georgia. We're up by 2.5%, or 117,000 votes with only 7% left. They're never going to catch us. They can't catch us. Likewise, we've clearly won North Carolina. 1.4%, or 77,000 votes with only approximately 5% left. They can't catch us. We also, if you look and you see Arizona, we have a lot of life in that. And somebody declared that it was a victory for, and maybe it will be. I mean, that's possible. But certainly there were a lot of votes out there that we could get, because we're now just coming into what they call Trump territory. I don't know what you call it, but these were friendly Trump voters. And that could be overturned. The gentleman that called it, I watched tonight, he said, well, we think it's fairly unlikely that he could catch. Well, fairly unlikely.
The majority mark in America is for 270. It's at 270. The Republicans so far, Donald Trump has 213. Short by 57, and Democrats, Joe Biden stands at 238, short by 32. But there is still the potential of this figure changing quite a bit once the counting starts again. Now let's take a look at the swing states and who has managed to take those swing states, or who is ahead, who has the lead in those swing states. Let's first start with Arizona, which has 11 electoral votes. Here Joe Biden is leading. He's at 51%. Donald Trump is at 48%. The second state we are going to look at is Florida. Very critical. Now, why is this critical? Because also Florida is said to be a bellwether state. Largely, 90% of the time, the party who's taken Florida has taken the White House as well. And in this state, with 29 electoral votes, it's Donald Trump, the Republicans, who are ahead. The third swing state is Pennsylvania, with 20 electoral votes, also very critical. Donald Trump has 56% there, he's leading, and Joe Biden is at 43%. Let's move on now to Ohio. Ohio has 18 electoral votes. Again here, the Republicans are leading, followed by the next state that we are going to talk about. The 6 swing states are very important, and what is interesting is that in most of them, it is the Republicans who are leading. Michigan as well, you've got Donald Trump in the lead. Maybe it is because of these results that an enthused Donald Trump, even as Joe Biden was saying, let's wait for the results. It is not in our place to really declare who has won and who has not. Donald Trump has said, you can stop the counting. I am the president. I have won already. I am leading everywhere. North Carolina as well, with 15 electoral votes, you see Donald Trump in the lead. So there is a lot of enthusiasm in the Republican side, and they feel with the swing states giving them. And you know what is also interesting is that the pollsters had predicted most of these states going the Democrat way. However, Donald Trump has managed to surprise many. Wisconsin is one of those where Joe Biden, the Democrats, are leading. But again, it's very, very close. In Iowa, the final one, again, Donald Trump sees a lead. It's very interesting. It's not over till it's over, as wise people have said. Okay, now you would have heard ad nauseum that the electoral system in India is vastly different from what we see in America. How do you make sense of the numbers that you see so far, and what explains the confidence of Donald Trump? Kamal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary, joins us along with Mr. W.P.S. Sidhu, also former diplomat, Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, Professor Christine Fair, American political scientist, Dr. John Harrison, with Homeland Security and Intelligence Program at the Rabdan Academy in Abu Dhabi. Let me start by asking you, Kamal Sibal, do you think it is possible for Donald Trump to still outdo all the predictions and the polls? Is it possible that he can still get the numbers? And if yes, in what scenario?
Well, I think it is possible. Right from the start, in terms of predictions, it was always felt that it will be a very close race. Of course, they were showing Biden with a 10-point lead and all that. But that was at the national level. But as you rightly said, it's the swing states that count. And that is where the uncertainty was. And that is why people felt that it would be a very close race and Trump could still surprise the pollsters and win the race, which it appears he might just. How to explain this? Well, basically, he's going to lose the popular vote is quite clear. And in any normal democracy, if you've got the majority vote behind you, you should be the elected leader. But in America, because of this very peculiar and flawed electoral system, where the electoral system is there, which is actually a big distortion in terms of the practice of democracy. But of course, the United States has built this reputation of being highly democratic, but it's not the case. And if you look at the genesis of the electoral system, it is rooted in U.S. Social fractures and even some people say racism and stuff like that. But that let's not be polemical. But the short point is that Trump. It is very surprising. I must say this. It's very surprising that Trump has been able to make this comeback and is on the point, perhaps, of winning.
Okay, Professor Fair, sorry to interrupt.
Given his record and the polarization in the U.S. society,
yes,
of which he is the principal architect, and on the Democratic side, there are a lot of right-thinking people with right-thinking agendas, and his agenda is very controversial.
You know, it's very interesting you bring up that word polarization, because if there's one thing that's common from America to Aradia, this is one word that we see being spoken in all elections these days, including the ones that we are seeing right now in Bihar as well. But Professor Fair, let me ask you, they were called deplorables, but today they are the doughty ones who seem to be not just hanging on, but clawing back. What explains...
No. They're not clawing back. You see...
They're not?
No, they're not. These polls are deeply problematic. In 2016, I told people Trump is going to win. And I said very clearly, Trump is going to win this too. And there's two reasons for this. The first is the deplorable math of what I call the slave state college. This is not provocative to say, and in fact, it's a fact, that the electoral college system, which is such an anathema to democracy, is rooted in this country's history of slavery. That's not provocative, that is a fact. And so the way you would do this with any kind of mathematical relevance is that you would have to have polls, and there's some noise in the background, which is very distracting. You would have to have polls of each state that would accurately predict how voters are leaning. And then you would have to run it through a spreadsheet where you actually do the math of the Electoral College. This is why polls don't work. Polls only work in a system where we directly vote the president, i.e. a system that is actually democratic, right? So, and of course, the Republicans are doing everything that they can to protect this system, because not only are we an ideologically polarized country, we are a geographically polarized country, right? So persons who have more progressive cosmopolitan values, less likely to be supportive of rape culture and racism, we tend to congregate in places whose votes are discounted. That is to say, we tend to skew left. The people whose votes are overcounted by the slave state college, which I insist upon calling that, their views are more regressive. They tend to believe that white people are under attack.
I think Professor Fair, Dr. John Harrison was very upset. He was vehemently disagreeing with you earlier, and now
he's welcome to do that. We are a country apparently of disagreement, but the Republicans are not going to let go of the Electoral College because they are losing the straightforward popular vote. And the Electoral College is the only way they hang on to power. And I also want to point out that polls don't matter. It's actually who is allowed to vote, right? Polls only indicate preference. And the Republicans, and I'm sure your guests might also, have a problem with this chuddies after I say this. The Republicans have also built a system upon voter disenfranchisement, right? So you take a state like Georgia, where it is not a coincidence that they removed polling stations overwhelmingly in African-American communities. This is a blatant effort to disenfranchise African-Americans. So gerrymandering, where I live in Virginia, is completely legal. So between the mathematics of the slave state college and voter suppression, the polls don't matter.
So you're
what
saying
matters is yes.
So you're saying that this is rigging by another way, by another means.
It is absolutely rigging, and I feel completely comfortable saying this. But it's a kind of rigging that, because the Republicans have also festooned the courts with Republican partisans of very little other qualifications. Many of these gerrymandering restrictions have been upheld by the court. So this is legally sanctioned rigging.
So from the point where the polling happens, Sushant Sareen, to even the courts, the rigging is complete.
Yeah, look, but the problem is that, this is the same system which has been there for last almost 200 years, more than 200 years. When you win from that same system, you crib about it's all perfectly fine. When you start losing, there's a big problem. Professor Fair might have
You don't know anything about our system, and that's simply not true. Those of us who are principled proponents of democracy, we oppose this system.
We heard her in patience. She should have she should have the grace.
You should actually have someone on your show who is knowledgeable of our system, and that's not Sushant.
I don't know why she has to do this
Professor Fair,
I think
it's only fair that we give each other time to at least put forth our views.
People who are knowledgeable
you had uninterrupted time to put forward your views. I think Sushant Sareen now wants to rebut. Let's give him that time. Go on, Sushant Sareen.
So the thing is that, it's the same system for everybody. Somebody makes the play on the system much better. Frankly, I have no skin in the game. But my only point is, and the only thing which really interests me is how badly the so-called liberal media in the US has got this wrong. The way and rigging is, both ways. Once you start projecting that one side is winning so big, like by more than 10 percentage points or 12 percentage points, to my mind, I think that is also a sort of rigging, because what you are doing is, you're not doing journalism. What you are doing is activism. What you are doing is not analysis. What you are doing is advocacy. And you're pretending that this is what is actually happening on the ground.
So these polls in itself could have influenced voter behavior, Sushant Sareen. Is that what you're suggesting? An attempt at least?
No, of course. And we have seen this in India, haven't we? We've seen this in India, where you have people who have actually been projecting, a particular party is going to come third in the election, and it sweeps an election by almost a tsunami-like verdict. So clearly, this is what is happening. And this is a problem for these guys to sort it out. Frankly, it makes no difference to me whether it's Biden or it's Trump. It doesn't make any difference.
Okay, Professor Fair, I will bring you back in to respond to that. But can I please, to everyone on the panel, let's maintain respect for each other. Like I said, views of all sides are being solicited and invited, and we are giving everyone a patient hearing. Let's not be resistant to each other's views, to, demean each other. Dr. John Harrison.
Padmaja, if you get a crazy person on your show, then this is what is going to happen. So,
yes,
frankly, it doesn't surprise.
Because I'm moderating, I am requesting civility from everyone, and I am giving space to everyone to put out their views in a civilized fashion. Dr. John Harrison, you wanted to come in.
Well,
yes,
then you should get civilized people on your show. You shouldn't get people like this.
Dr. John Harrison.
Who are, capital trolls.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, as you can see, I think politics initiates passion all over the place, and I think that can be certainly seen in our conversation so far. What's been fascinating is certainly whatever one thinks of whatever the outcome will be. Once again, polling, and it's not just confined to the United States, but polling around the world has missed something. And what pollsters, at least in the U.S., aren't really talking about is that only about 2 to 3% of people respond to polls. So you're not sure who you're getting, or at least you're getting people who are very passionate one way or the other. So I think there will have to be some reckoning done with the polling, because again, we can't just keep getting this wrong, particularly when the public and political parties and political movements depend on the accuracy of the data that you're getting. But I think more broadly, what seems a little strange, and prior to coming to academia, I worked extensively in U.S. politics. I'm not familiar with any state or part of a state, in this case a county, just sort of unilaterally saying we're stopping counting. Now, if there was a reason for that, I think there was a little bit of it was incumbent on the town clerk or whoever made the decision to say to the population why the count is stopping. Because whether there's a legitimate reason or not, and I'm certainly not casting any aspersions, but it does inject into the process a great deal of uncertainty. And particularly in a time that is so polarized, not only around the world, but in the US as well, that any sort of injection of this kind will automatically lead both sides to conclusions that probably aren't accurate. And so I think it was incumbent on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or the clerk's office or whomever controls the counting in Philadelphia County to come forward and just say, we have to stop because. And even if nobody agreed with it, at least there was a transparent reason for it. And I think that's an important part of the system, that we get, that we do get the counting right, and that there isn't any sort of discrepancy or concern that there could be discrepancies. And certainly polling can do that. Certainly there are legal processes that some states have followed very well, and some states haven't followed very well. And they've had some officials who it's not clear whether they have the authority to do such, to make such decisions, have made unilateral decisions, which again, there may be reasons for this. But the problem is they're not explaining the reasons, they're just making these statements. And I think because of the polarization that is so common in politics now, that any elected official or public official and public servant should make a concerted effort to be transparent in their decision making, explain it to the public, and then move on from that. And I think that's what's really been lacking in across the board. And certainly we've had some media last night who was declaring Arizona early. The declarations may have been correct. It's not necessarily a debate over that. It's debate over the timing, and it's debate over the lack of transparency. And I think that's one of the things that has really come across throughout this entire process.
Mr. Sidhu, irrespective of what the ultimate outcome is, would you agree, looking at the lead up to this day, that Donald Trump faced a perception bias?
Well, I think there's, one could say the same thing about Biden as well. Depends on what channels you're listening to. So it's, that bias and that different approaches and perspectives you see is really everywhere. It's across media, it's across the voters, and it's almost in every almost in every walk of life, and sadly now is also extending to other institutions which are supposed to provide a certain degree of check and balance, including, for example, the judiciary, both in the United States, but one might argue even in India. But let's be clear about a couple of things here. Number one, as you rightly said, the election is still not being called. It's probably a day or maybe even days away from being called yet. Number two, while there has not been the Biden blue wave or landslide that perhaps Biden and camp was expecting, it is also quite clear that until now, both parties have not really gained anything except Biden with Arizona. And that's been the first flip, if you like, of that. So it's still quite early to say how this is going to play out. But I would say, at least looking at this, the flip has been in one direction rather than the other sort of direction. But let's also be very clear that this is the largest turnout ever. In the history of the United States. It's estimated to be about over 160 million, and all the votes have not been counted because of the way that the votes have been cast this time. They've been cast in person, they've been cast early, and they've been cast by mail. So once that tally happens, and it may still be clear that President Trump may be re-elected, and that's fine and understandable as long as it's a system that works in that way. But the counting has to be complete. And just to put a comparison, although it's not a fair comparison, because in many ways the United States is not like Belgium, but Belgium actually had to wait almost a year before they actually had a government in place. And the last time we saw this in the United States, in the year 2000, 20 years ago, it was only in December that the election was decided.
All right, so let's not pass judgment just as yet, but the differences in the kind of polls we had seen, the approval ratings we had seen, and what we are seeing in terms of the turnout now and the results so far does raise plenty of questions. Simply raising those questions here for the time being. Thank you very much, all gentlemen, for having joined me. Taking a quick break.